Reyem, I'm an alcoholic. I'm like all tearing up and getting a bit emotional here. Sure. Thanks, Josh, for cheering for me and all the guidance so far. And thanks to everyone for being here, because without you guys keeping these doors open, I'd be dead today. I was thinking back to a year ago today, and some of you might know, some of you were around at that time, literally dying to the extent where people didn't actually think I was going to pull through, and the best part of all of that is I had nobody to blame but myself. I brought myself to that point. I was killing myself, and that continued for quite a few months in my early sort of recovery, where I was up at a treatment center and in and out of a nurse's station all the time, down to the hospital, and the only person responsible for all of that was me. But today I have an opportunity to live, and I get that opportunity through being here, through having worked the 12 steps and trying to practice them to the best of my ability on a daily basis, Going back, there's a lot of really sad cases of people that go through abuse and so forth, that almost seem valid for them to drink, not that it is, but it almost seems valid. I don't have any of those excuses, even though I certainly conjured up those excuses going through life, I managed to blame everything and everyone for everything, and therefore I drank. I was born into a loving young family. They worked really hard just to ensure that we're okay. They did well for themselves, and I was just always ungrateful. My earliest memory was one of being separate and apart from. I just looked at the world, and the world was just too harsh for me. I just struggled to relate. I was quite a loner. I was an only child for a very long time. I struggled to make friends, and when I made friends, somehow, even at a very young age, I was in quite a lot of faulty friendships. I suppose from a very early age, I attracted like-minded people, and I always sort of hung on to anything external to me to feel better about me, and I also remember clearly being in nursery school and acting out on defects. I can see that in hindsight. At the time, I of course didn't know that. And I remember one of my earliest memories was I found some printing paper with some writing on it, and I cut it up and I invited everyone to my wedding, but sincerely invited them to my wedding and made myself believe that I'm getting married, And so I continued to live in this fantasy world, And with that, other pre-primary nursery school kids all kind of bought into it, and there was a lot of attention around it, and I fixed off that, I remember my folks told me about my willfulness from a very young age, where one day they just realized I was missing, and I think I was about 3 or 4 at the time, and I had somehow gotten out of the complex and went about a kilometer, just under a kilometer down to the local shop and helped myself to sweets, and they eventually found me on my way back, and went and settled my bill of sweets that I helped myself with. Fortunately, the shop owner knew us, and kind of let it slide. I suppose there's also where it's, sort of an unhealthy relationship with my family also started, with them sort of bailing me out and me doing what I want to do, and, and the consequences were minimal, And I know today that my family always just did the best they could for me, at the time, and I'm really grateful for that, because that continued for many years on, it's still till today, I had a pretty normal upbringing. Went to good schools. I was always provided for. My family tried best not to spoil me, but I was entitled brat, and I kind of ensured I got my way, and I suppose from a very early age I also learned how to manipulate the situation, and to play on my folks' guilt, and I suppose I had a lot of guilt because they were both professional and not at home all the time, and so yeah. But what I also learned at a very early age is to sort of be quite quietly mischievous and, present very well. And how I would do that is I would come across as the quiet good boy, but behind the scenes I just did what I want, And it's something that suited me because by presenting to me this good little boy, people always kind of sort of my mom's friends always thought I was this great, well-mannered child, and but what they weren't seeing is that I, did whatever I wanted, and from a very early age, I suppose I caused a lot of grey hair, for my family. I remember my first drink when I was standard 2, which is grade 4. I went to a friend's house. His dad was actually a police officer, but they were out there in the complex, and the two of us decided to climb into his dad's alcohol cabinet. We made a mean cocktail, which I think curdled a bit, but we swallowed it down, and then went out to the swings in the complex, and my friend was violently ill, and I felt like I was on top of the world, and that was the marked difference between him and myself, I suppose in that I was too young to realize that that's a solution for me, or that was, to become my solution. But it certainly had a profound effect on me, Going through sort of getting into my early teens, I was a very moody child, my mom and my biological father went through a divorce. My mom was remarried not long after that, and growing up, there was kind of this unhealthy codependence between my mom and myself, because my mom and my dad were a very unlikely match. They kind of stuck it out because of me. Again, them trying to do the best for me, and subsequently I sort of disregarded my dad from a really early age, and I became really close to my mom, and I did absolutely everything with my mom. So when my mom sort of remarried, it didn't suit me, because of course it's all about me. And I hated my stepfather so much, and I put up such a fuss, but I also didn't do it like in your face, They fought a lot, and I would be there to console my mom, and then sort of like, get favor. But I was extremely jealous of their relationship, and I found it completely unaccepting, like it was up to me to accept that, and I started pushing a lot of boundaries. It was in sort of early high school that I started smoking cigarettes, and it wasn't because of peer pressure. I never did anything out of peer pressure. I did everything I did going through my life, I did because I wanted to, and my sort of high school years were really hard on my family, because I was hugely overweight, because I developed a huge eating problem. I found a lot of comfort in food. I was smoking, I was pushing boundaries, my mom would give me a curfew, and I would break the curfew by 4 hours, and then, I'd get into trouble, and, that would ease off again, and then I'd start pushing boundaries again, and just a lot of chaos, I certainly didn't make life easy for anyone around me. My mom and my stepfather eventually were divorced when I was in about standard 9, and I was like, okay, well, now I've got my mom all to myself again, but at the same point in time, I was also sort of like wanting to do what I wanted to do, and she was interfering with that, so I made a lot of fuss about that, and eventually just continued to push boundaries and stuff. Through my sort of high school years, I drank on occasion. My household, my folks were quite strict, so I was very afraid of them, and I didn't actually sort of act out that much. It's only sort of my matric year and then leaving school. I mean, there was a lot of in standard 8, in standard 8 I was asked to leave a really good school because I had a sort of storeroom on the property. I would probably have drunk more if I could actually tolerate it, but I couldn't. I went to another, my mom put me into another really good school, and I was not interested, I got really average grades. I didn't open books before, the night before test I'll try and cram, I felt separate and apart from I got bullied, and sort of, quite a bit, it was an all-boys school, and, I came from quite a liberal co-ed school before that, but the thing is, I, again, used that to my advantage, because through that, I got people off site, and I got away with a lot more murder, so I eventually finished school. I remember sort of getting my matric results, and my mom always thought that I was pretty bright and that I'd do well, and I passed. That's about as grand as what that was, really just, I think I got an F4 history, and the other subjects weren't much better, I think my family had lots of aspirations that I'd finish school and I'll go to university and I'd follow in their footsteps and what have you, and through a lack of trying on my behalf and no interest, because that's not where I wanted to be, that's not what I achieved, From sort of like teenage years, I've always wanted to be somewhere where I'm not, and that was always, when I was a teenager, all I wanted to be is an adult, I think when I became an adult, all I wanted to be is an older adult, and then somehow later on, all I wanted to become is a teenager again. I've never been satisfied. Never been satisfied with me, and I've never been satisfied with anything around me, and it's only really after school that I took a gap year and I went across to the UK, where I really, truly found my solution in alcohol. I not being sort of under sort of like the family watch and being being independent in a country far away from here, I realized that I cannot do as I pleased, and I really what drinking did for me is I love what that reading said about, that bonding, because it actually really gave me that. It really was a solution for a long period of time, because it helped me sort of connect to people who I've never been able to connect with people before. It took away all my fears, all my anxieties, it alleviated my immense self-obsession, it sort of made me feel a part of, and I suppose that's something I always lacked, is feeling a part of. And everything I'd done leading up to that was trying to, and this wasn't consciously, it was just subconsciously, trying to find that sort of place in the world, and I never had that place in the world. So my drinking was completely unmanageable and alcoholic from day one, because I found a solution and I did everything in my power to maintain that solution, In that same year, I also started dabbling into narcotics, and even sort of alcohol's great and powerful, but this was even more powerful for me, and so I ran off on a tangent with that. And I literally went to the UK for a year with all intention to go backpacking and traveling through Europe, and had all these visa photos, and I was going to do that. And to be honest, I don't think I even saw Buckingham Palace, and I lived quite close to Buckingham Palace. I even in that year at a fancy dress party won a prize to go on this bus trip to Bath and Stonehenge and all of that, and I was actually incapable of actually just getting onto that bus and doing that. It was all about the party, and all about sort of fulfilling this new sense of freedom, if I can put it that way, or sense of belonging that I started to experience. While I was there, my mom said to me, look, your gap year's coming up, what are you going to go study? And at the time I was working in hotels and restaurants, so I said, well, I'll go study hotel management. Came back, went through all the interviews, everything, got into a really nice hotel school, but I still sort of my solution was still in my drinking, And especially coming back to Pretoria and living quite close to my folks, I realized that I'll have to let go of narcotics, because that will be frowned upon. But alcohol is socially acceptable, and my folks have a couple of glasses of wine, and and I can do that. And again, sort of my drinking was extremely alcoholic. I used to drive around with a 5-liter box of Pick and Pay no-name brand wine, and unknowingly I used to tell people, this is my alcoholics overnight bag, because wherever I take this, I will overnight, and not knowing that a few years later, I'd actually be in this fellowship, because it was a big joke for me in those days, because I was so completely blind to what was going on for me, and how everyone was watching me in like absolute terror, destroying myself, And I think it got to a point where it started getting bad, and there were some consequences of some minor car accidents, and like my studies weren't going great. There was a time that I was actually packing a flask of wine just to go to Joburg to college, and that needed to get me there because I was so hungover in the mornings, that I wasn't capable of actually getting out of bed, And then miraculously I found a relationship, and the relationship sorted everything out, because in hindsight I can see that it's not about the alcohol, it's about me being unable to live life, because suddenly I had this new fix, and I was in this relationship, and I became hugely obsessed, and like everything, it became my primary focus, It got to a point where my great uncle was busy dying, and because of a lot of issues in the relationship, like there was sort of like I'd moved out and moved in with friends, and like of course I would I broke my partner down to death, like how horrible and like how whatever, and so subsequently it became a little bit awkward to see my partner, So I used the excuse of my uncle to secretly say, well, I'm going to the hospital, and then I'd go off and, sort of rendezvous with my ex. And that was just because I had no consideration for anyone or anything, not even my partner, because it was all about me, really, It's always been about me. In the initial stages, the first 6-7 months of this relationship, I hardly drank, because I had no need to, because my sense of belonging was fulfilled. I was fixing off something else, And when that fizzled out, I just got back to drinking straight off, because that was my ultimate solution. To the extent that not long after that, in my 3rd year of studying, it got so bad, and I got back involved in narcotics, and I found myself in my first treatment center in Johannesburg. I, again, being able to present really well and comply really well and say the right things and do the right things, I managed to pass through there with flying colors. And I even managed to, it wasn't a treatment center run by alcoholics, it was a treatment center run by social workers, and that might work for some people, but not this alcoholic, because I managed to convince my social worker that drugs is my problem and therefore I can still drink, and she agreed, so my first weekend out, because you're allowed to sort of last weekend out and then you go back and you round off, I went out drinking, and inhibitions lowered, I took drugs as well, so I got back to this facility and I was like hiding literally under my bed. Too scared to, because I knew they would test me, because that's the routine when you get back. I managed to escape that, and because I wasn't serious about it, I didn't actually really at that point in time even acknowledge that I had a problem. I just sort of like vaguely thought my family has a problem, because obviously that sent me to a rehab, and if only they understood me a little better and realized that this is a phase, and I'm just young and I'm having a party, Anyway, so I got out of there, things did not go well. My folks sort of like locked me out of the property. At that point in time, moved back with them. And then sort of while I was in this treatment facility, I was applying for jobs, and one of them came through, and I moved to Central Burke, and I got there all arrogant and full of myself, and I'm like, I didn't even finish my studies, but I was walking around there as an assistant F&B manager thinking that, I just come off as general manager from a big resort property, I used to walk out and pour myself a cup of coffee, just gaze over the restaurant, not do any real work, and I really thought that was my job, and all my sort of like, I don't even know what the word is, sort of like grandiosity. I thought that was my job, and anyway, that wasn't my job. So I got into trouble quite quickly, and I had a performance review at this resort, and the performance review was basically them just telling me that pull your socks up or you will become lesser than the waiter because that's kind of where you belong. Somehow I managed to actually start doing some work, and then I found that actually fixed me because suddenly I'm getting a lot of affirmation. I'm applying myself, and I'm running these conferences. They're like giving me responsibility with these conferences and other areas, and they're actually like being appreciative of me, and the guests that I'm dealing with are like liking me, and that became really fixed. So I fixed off that for a while, but all of it really eventually just stopped working, and slowly but surely. Just quickly, on that same property, like a month in from working there, because staff were allowed to drink at the bar, I got banned from the bar. I was the only staff member banned from the bar. Everyone else, and I couldn't understand why, like I was just having a couple of drinks after work. And dancing on the bar tables. It's not great for a staff member to do that. So I pulled my socks up, I worked really hard, and it fixed me for quite a while. And then eventually it stopped fixing me, and I got back into my drinking. And fortunately, before burning that bridge, and I've burned many bridges going forward, but before burning that bridge, I was offered a position in Tanzania, which I took up, and I resigned, and I left on good terms. And they said, if ever you want to come back, thank God I never went back, because I would have burned that bridge too, like really badly. Went across to Tanzania, got stuck into working again, fixed off work for quite a while. My drinking was still quite subdued, and then eventually that stopped working. 6 months in, I got a promotion quite quickly, like quite a nice promotion. And it's all about me, and like look how good I'm doing and whatever, and also being an extremist. I would work sort of 18 hours a day without any breaks, because I felt that that's my responsibility and that's what I need to be doing, and burning myself out in the process. I never quite got the concept of balance. I never had any balance in my life. It was either all or nothing. Same with my drinking. So anyway, I ended up sort of drinking away there again, and before long, got involved into a whole bunch of other nonsense in Tanzania, and before I knew it, I was in Tanzania. I was fired, and I had no means of like getting back to South Africa. I was stuck in this like foreign country, like 10 months, 12 months down the line. Got some friends to bail me out, and I suppose that's kind of like the time where things really started getting hectic, and I was in my sort of early 20s. The consequences became more and more severe, and the frequency of me bombing out and making a complete ass of myself was more regular, I think my family started cottoning on to the fact that I'm not okay, and they were making it quite clear, telling me that I'm not okay, and I was still blaming them for everything, and because if they didn't fight while I was in high school, I would have been in a better position today, because that's the obvious sort of, where my mind was working. It's all their fault. I took responsibility for absolutely nothing. If I got fired from a job, it wasn't my fault. It's because my boss is an arsehole. If I got into, I rammed a curb and slashed 2 tires in a blackout, and that was my ex slashed my tires at the place that I was at. Nothing was ever my responsibility. So anyway, I eventually came back to South Africa. My folks spent about 2 weeks with me up in St. Lucia, since they'd moved from Victoria to St. Lucia. At the end of the 2 weeks, my mom said, "You can't stay here," and today I know why, because I was inhospitable. I was like hard work, because it was all about me, and I was selfish and entitled and arrogant, and I was just a horrible human being. So I moved down to Durban, and that's where I kind of came to sunny east coast of KZN 14 years ago. Didn't go well. It took me forever to find a job. I had many excuses. I said because I had gotten such a good promotion in Tanzania, I'm overqualified for South Africa, and therefore that's nonsense, bullshit. The reality of the matter is I was lazy. I was lazy. I was completely undisciplined, and all I really wanted to do is drink and behave like a muppet. Eventually got a job with Zimbabwe. I think it lasted 2 months before I got fired. Again, it's the boss's fault that I stole the float. I told my mom it's the boss's fault. And then I went through a series of went out there, went into another treatment center in Durban Central. It was actually at that time when I went in there that I first heard about this fellowship, and it was actually Caleb that came and did an H&I there with this other guy, Darren, and I spoke to him afterwards. He told me about this fellowship, and I thought, well, I'll go check it out, And in that time, I'd made a couple of good friends there, and the one friend, Jeffrey, was very sort of amped and into this, and he dragged me to as many meetings as we possibly could drag me to. I used to kick and scream a lot at going to meetings, because I used to sit in these meetings and I used to look around me and I used to look at all the differences, and I felt like I didn't belong here, and that the solution that is offered in these meetings is certainly not for me, because I'm not an alcoholic like you guys. I'm not an alcoholic. In those days, I certainly did not believe I was an alcoholic. I still believe that I had control over everything, and if everything just worked according to my plan, then everything will be okay. But sometimes just things don't work out the way I want them to, and therefore I have trouble every now and again. Anyway, so that's where sort of my journey with this fellowship started. In and out, tried to collect a few milestones, which clearly I was not. I was not in a good state to actually collect them, but it was like showing face. I remember there was a 90 days tag I tried to collect. Miraculously, the meeting sort of ran out of those tags that evening, because I was off my face, And then I would also, on occasion, have sort of motor mouthing on substances at meetings, and thinking I'm sharing great. But such a mess. But through that all, by attending some meetings on occasion, I actually heard of another treatment center. By this time, I'd gone to the one in Durban a couple of times more for refresher courses. And I heard of this other treatment center, and I kicked against the fact that it was 3 months. I would not, 3 months, do you know how valuable 3 months is in my life? The person who's unemployed, unemployable. At that point in time, I was suspended for fraud from Flight Centre. But 3 months is so valuable, I can't do that, Anyway, it ended up that I went to this treatment centre and stayed 9 months. But I was far from actually sort of embracing this and doing what I needed to do, I was still in charge, really. And I've remained in charge, hopefully until this last time, because I always thought that I knew what I needed to do, and I did the 12 steps, and to the best of my ability, I worked through them honestly. When I got to my step 5, I carried a few secrets, which I eventually exposed, but I was still very self-reliant, I wasn't ready to do everything that I was supposed to do, I was not ready to follow suggestions. So the moment I left there, and I actually moved to Pennington, and I worked at a hotel here, I stopped phoning a sponsor or being in contact with a sponsor. I stopped going onto my knees. I stopped doing step 11s because I'm not being watched now, so I don't have to do these things, I can now make my own decisions. It didn't last 3 months, and I was off my face. Fortunately, when I applied for this job, I told them I was alcoholic. So when when the walls came tumbling down, at least I knew what was wrong with me. And they actually were quite supportive. I went back for a short 28-day stint, came back out, stayed sober for about 9 months, I think. In that time, my sponsor was Don. Anyway, so I went through a process of, sorry. I'd really like to honor him today as well. He's fighting to be here with us today and amongst us. Anyway, so I got the go-ahead to move up to St. Lucia. I did a big sort of farewell high tea at Linton Hall in all my splendor for people of the fellowship, and it's ridiculous when I think back to it now. But anyway, so I moved up to St. Lucia, where I was going to go work for my family for. Again, I got there with the same sort of attitude that I started my first job. This amazing sort of hotelier who was going to just like stand on his high ground and oversee operations from a distance, and that's not work. So that also just came crumbling to a halt quite quickly. I was in a lot of conflict with my family because they really thought that I would, because I actually did some good work at the previous hotel, to a large extent, and they thought that I'd bring that across to their property, and I didn't. But also, I was so not okay. It didn't take long when I actually relapsed, I was at this little convention, and I remember saying to Tracy, sitting in the back there, that my phone has been stolen at the convention. Meantime, I lost it the night before on a bench, But I didn't want to own up to that, I was at this mini convention here in Scotland, And they managed to get me to Don, who convinced me to go up to the treatment center for 7-day detox, whatever that might be. And I ended up staying a month and went back out there. And I don't know quite how, because I was certainly not, I suppose the early stages I kind of did what I was told to do. But I managed to stay sober for 4 years. 2 of the 4 years I sincerely really tried hard. But what was interesting at that point in time is at that 28 days, when my 28 days were coming to an end, it was suggested that I that I put in the effort to try and stay longer, and invest in recovery, and I was completely unwilling. And I believe today that decision made on self-will is what caught me out at a later stage, because I wasn't following suggestion and direction, which meant to me that when the heat got on later on, I wasn't going to follow any direction from my sponsor either, because I couldn't follow direction from my sponsor at that time, So I went out there, I went to as many meetings as I could, and I tried to be part of the fellowship. And even, I came with this sort of like attitude of like, I know better, because I've worked through the 12 steps and everything, and these meetings are shit, and I'm going to so it became all about ego, I started, in my opinion, running NA in Richards Bay out of, I was president of NA in Richards Bay. And I was like hosting step work meetings, and I was like sponsoring people, and and I just thought, I was really grand, a grand member of NA. Like Bill Wilson will be proud. It's such bullshit, really. So it didn't last long, of course. After the first 2 years, like everything else, I wasn't drinking, but everything else was my fix, So I was running 85 kilometers a week, and I was in boot camp, and I was buying new cars, and I was going on these massive shopping sprees. Going on these massive shopping sprees, and getting into like faulty relationships, and it's because again, it's not about the alcohol necessarily, even though it's a big solution. It was a big solution for me. It wasn't about the alcohol. It was about me being unable to be okay with me, then eventually, sort of like ended up relapsing, and I relapsed for nearly a year at that time. I managed to somehow keep it under wraps, which was quite bizarre, but I managed to keep it under wraps, and then eventually just all wheels came off, and I found myself without a job and nowhere to go, and as a result of that, I ended up going back to the treatment center, clearly, I mean, I've never, up until the last time I actually reached out for help, I've always had an agenda, whether it being to save a job, because I've got nowhere else to go, because I've just caught out, I always had an agenda, and the thing is, I never really moved from that agenda, it remained my agenda, and it was basically what it boiled down to is because I was in charge and I was trusting myself, bottom line. So I went back, I ended up sort of going through treatment for a couple of months, ended up volunteering at the treatment center, and I was just faulty, I got into a relationship 6 months in. I was defrauding the treatment center through like issuing petrol slips and that weren't legit. I got into a lot of trouble with the boss there, Keith, which is quite terrifying. I was manipulating my sponsor to help me pay for my insurance. Meantime I was getting UIF payments, which I was just squandering into all sorts of other like areas. And then of course, for all intents and purposes, I was staying sober, and I really thought I was going to stay sober. I really thought that I was going to, by means of practicing the Reyem program, I'm going to stay sober. I had no intention of drinking until the relationship ended. The relationship, which I eventually chased all the way down to Durban, ended, and a couple of weeks later, I was drunk. And I stayed drunk for 4 years, and the last 4 years has been absolutely fucking atrocious. Sorry for my word, but it has been. There were times that I was so delusional and in so much denial that I thought things were grand, but if I really look at how completely and utterly unmanageable and how painful it really was, I mean, the lengths that I went to sustain my drinking, which involved this prostitution, which involved stealing, defrauding, manipulating, I mean, the lengths that I went to was surreal, and it was lengths that I never thought I would be capable of, all in, because I was fighting to do as I want, and I was fighting to drink, and I still had this attitude of in regards to my family, because I believe that they actually have no input in my life right now, because I'm fully independent from them. I'm not asking them of anything, and I truly believe that, What I was missing in that whole thing is how my sort of absence and me killing myself was destroying them, I might not have been robbing them of money and, stuff, but I was robbing them of the most valuable, possession, and was a healthy state of mind and well-being. My mom had many sleepless nights over me, and I never actually realized that I was so far gone. Because all about me now, all I was thinking about was me, and I'm not affecting them. Is what I believed. Obviously, at some point they broke contact with me. Well, we broke contact. Because I think they were too devastated to watch me kill myself, and I kind of just sort of wanted to do what I wanted to do. I made contact with them again last year, February, to which I went and spent just over a week with them, and I made myself believe that I was going there to sort of sort things out and make things better, and sort of fix things, just to make contact with my family again. The truth is, and at the time I really believed my story, but the truth is I actually had nowhere else to go, and I was unable. I had these huge boils on my knees, and I was actually incapable of walking. So I was not well, and I was actually I needed a break from my life. So I went to my family, and my mom gave me one look, and she's like, "Oof, you need help. You really, really need help." And this was building up for some time, and then my mom organized some help for me. To Josh and Dr. Biden came all the way up to St. Lucia to bring me back, and I refused. And I was just too full of fight. I had so much fight left that I just absolutely refused to come back. And so what resulted from that was my family had to set healthy boundaries for them, and I'm glad they did that. and they needed to get rid of me, you know. And so I was dropped off in Richards Bay, which is an hour from their house, at McDonald's with £5 in my pocket, and I was still full of it, you know. I was like, well, screw them, and I'll show them, and I'll be okay, and you know, and I still managed to make a plan and carry on. But you know what really unfolded in those 7 months up until the point that, and I think this is very valuable for me. If I had gone in February, I might not have been ready, you know. I might have just sort of like, yeah, just complied or whatever, you know. And what happened in those 7 months is, it got to a point where coming back here became the easier, softer way. And my entire life I've always looked for the easier, softer ways, and subsequently I've tried absolutely every direction. And for once in my life I started running out of directions to try as easier, softer ways. And yeah, on the 18th of August last year, I was so sick of it. There's like a build-up to it. I started almost obsessing about reaching out for help. It was almost like a daily thought. I was like, I need to phone. I can't do this. You know, and what really happened for me is I just became so sick and tired of myself, so sick and tired of my life, and so sick and tired of absolutely everything around me. Yet I'm quite a coward, so incapable of killing myself, you know, but also incapable of living. You know, I was just exhausted. I mean, the last day I came in, I couldn't even drink. I was that tired. And I reached out for help. My recovery so far has had amazing synchronicity. The person I reached out to was also celebrating his anniversary that day and gotten engaged that day. And I was actually there when they met on that day, 5 years earlier. And I wasn't aware of that at all at the time. I was just so sick and tired, and reached out, and somebody came and fetched me. And, you know, one of the things that I was so afraid of coming back for was because I was so embarrassed about my life, and I thought I would be judged and condemned. And having been around this fellowship for so long, and you know, and I'm going to be embarrassed, and all this fellowship really showed me from the point that I came back was unconditional love. People were so happy that I've come back, that I came back, you know. I've then found out that there were like some warrants of arrest out for me, and everyone trying to just get me back, you know. But the reality of the matter is I came back when, you know, like I wanted to, or needed to, you know, and this became the easiest, softer way. And I'm so truly grateful for that, you know. What I didn't realize at the time that I came back, because I was so absolutely gone mentally and delusionally, was the fact that I was dying. And I spent the first 2 months, as I mentioned earlier, of my recovery physically dying. You know, I wasn't going to make it really. And I suppose that was kind of my step one being beaten into me. You know, that moment when, as I mentioned earlier, I realized that I got myself here and I have absolutely nobody else to blame, you know. Yeah, when I got to my step 3, I was involved in an incident, an aggressive incident. I won't go into much detail because that's not important, but it was kind of like where I needed to be, because I could have run from it because of it. I could have made excuses and said, this is not for me, I'm not doing this, whatever, but I stuck it out, you know, and I'm grateful for that, because regardless of what happened, I just wanted this, you know, I just wanted to get better. And the process has been slow for me. It's been really slow for me. There's been a lot of stuff. When you're around this fellowship for quite a period of time, like, people get to know you really well. And they really get to point out the nitty-gritty shit, you know, and I really have been having to deal with that. And I think one of the biggest things is I've spent my life being a fraud, you know, and I've had to actually, and in that I had completely lost touch with who I am. I have no idea, still today, you know, really don't have much idea of who I am. But through following direction and suggestion to the best of my ability, and let me tell you, there's not a thing that I've been told to do that I haven't done. You know, I do absolutely everything to the best of my ability, and when my defects come flying about and they get pointed out to me, I speak to my sponsor and I try and get direction and I work on it. You know, I try and practice step 6 and 7, because I think finally the penny has dropped, that it's not about the alcohol, it's about me. It's about my inability to live life on life's terms. And by me following my own thinking, you know, all I'm going to do is like get nowhere. I'll kill myself, you know. And that this program actually gives me the ability to live, you know, and it's as simple as I try not to trust my thinking, but I can trust the thinking of somebody that's come before me, and you know, who I've become a really good friend with, you know, to give me that direction, and I value it because what I've been experiencing, and I always used to, many years ago, think that my car, my job, my clothes, my money, my relationships were gifts of recovery. What I've come to realize is that's all just fluff, you know, it's not important. The gifts of recovery for me today is the fact that I actually have a really good relationship with my family, you know. I saw my grandmother the other day for the first time in 7 years, and the last time she saw me, she refused to communicate with me directly. She refused to hold my hand when we did grace as a family around table. She refused to acknowledge my existence, and I spent some time with her in the Cape recently, and I buttered her toast and I poured her tea and I pushed a shopping trolley and I made it all about her, and I just loved her as she is, and the results have been incredible. I actually got a text the other day just like how much she loves me, and that was unknown of, you know. I saw my mom and my dad yesterday, and it was so awesome to actually just be around them. My dad, who I hated for so many years, we have a really awesome relationship today. I mean, a lot of work, you know, this is progress, not perfection. There will be a lot of work still, but, you know, those are incredible gifts. I have an ID today, which I haven't had in 7 or 8 years. I have a driver's license today, which incidentally expired 5 years ago, which I recently got, you know. But most of all, you know, I have all of you, and I actually feel a part of something, you know. And it's because I'm doing what I need to do, and I'm allowing it, you know, to unfold, you know. I've been given amazing opportunities to actually try and think of somebody else over and above myself, and I'm really grateful for that, you know. And my life this last year might have been tough, but it's been absolutely freaking awesome, you know. I have experienced incredible amounts of freedom, and my life has been vastly different to what it's ever been before. And it's awesome being here, and I think that's it. I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much.